Sorry about the sun.
All right. We'll go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Ad Hoc Pool Committee and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll open with our first public comment period. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak. Anyone wishing to speak in public comment? Mr. Racky.
Bill Racky. I have a couple comments that I would like to make. This has to do with the appearance of the pool. I don't know if any thoughts have gone into it about that, but I was thinking maybe a brick veneer look to it. Number one, thoughts of maybe an Art Deco look to it from the 30s. And number three, my thoughts were to get the historical committee involved in what the appearance of it might look like. That's it.
Thank you. All right, anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? All right, seeing no others, we'll close public comment. First item on the agenda for possible action is the approval of minutes from the January 21, 2020 meeting. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, entertain a motion for approval.
Mayor, I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. A second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move to item number 2 for possible action, discussion and direction regarding retaining a consultant for conceptual design and provide a cost estimate for the new complex. Mr. Luttrell.
Good afternoon, Mayor and committee members. As you just stated, Mayor, this item is for discussion and direction on possibly hiring a consultant for designing a new aquatic center. I did a little research on the last go-around that we did. We submitted an RFQ or sent out an RFQ, and we did have 14 people respond, or 14 firms. Some of them so-so, but we ended up bringing 4 firms in to interview. And that contract was for $109,000, but that also included some assessment of the existing facility, which is our next staff report or next agenda item. So, you guys have any recommendations, or can I answer any questions?
I'll just mention that, you've stated in the past that the company that was used previously, SH Architecture, no longer exists. They've either been purchased by another company or became another company.
Yeah, I believe they were bought out. They now go by KNIT Studios, KNIT.
Okay. Questions or comments from the committee? We'll go ahead and start down with Mr. Cohen. Any questions or comments?
Okay, I think the gentleman that just got up and spoke, that was a very good idea, because the rendering that was on the paperwork that was put out before looked very futuristic, if you will, and I think it would be good to follow the rest of the buildings in the city.
Yep. I do want to mention that we do have a 4th agenda item that we can talk about the features, and I would guess that would include the exterior of the building.
Well, also, I mean, does the Parks and Rec or the city now have, a list of things that we do want? I mean, I know you have that list that was put out before, and we eliminated some things like the outside pool and that. But do you have, a list of things that you're going to give to whoever you pick as to what we need as far as lanes and depth and all that kind of stuff?
I'm not sure my opinion matters much. I'm here to make sure the pool gets built. That would be a question for Parks and Recs or the staff that run the pool.
Yeah, well, I just wondered, are we giving them something that, to look at and say, okay, this is what we want?
Well, I think, I think that that's part of your duties here as a committee is to come up with what you guys want. We put forth a recommendation the last time of what we'd like to see down there. Now, obviously, the equipment changes in the mechanical room and all that stuff, and that's, standard practice now for aquatics, like a high-rate sand filter as opposed to a gravity-fed system, stuff like that. But the actual design of the pool complex would be, we'd get that idea from what you guys would like to see down there. And that's more of in item 4 when we can discuss features and that type of thing.
For this item, I'm thinking we'd do it similar to how we did it last time. We'd send out asking for statement of qualifications for different consultants, different firms that wanted to work on this project. And we would include some of the items from agenda item number 4, what amenities you guys want, what we want to actually receive from whatever consultant is selected.
I'm new, so put up with my ignorance. All through the notes and everything, I keep getting different terminology, aquatic center, aquatic complex, aquatic facility, pool. I'm trying to figure out, what, and I know we're trying to keep costs down. So I'm trying to figure out, and of course my thing is for the pool and add-ons later or whatever. So I guess I get a little bit. And then I also, with the SH Architecture's work and now they're knit, are they one of the 4, whatever, that respond? I mean, that work was done. I wouldn't want it to be totally, we paid a lot of money for that conceptual design back then. And I hate to see that money just be, so if you help me understand.
As to the name, I know there's lots of different names being thrown out there. It's whatever we want it to be or whatever you guys want it to be, whether it's just a pool or the whole facility. And then as for SH Architecture, they were one of the 4 that were selected for interviews, and they came out on top.
Well, I sort of want to build on what Mr. Reel said, in that I think that before it went to out, there are, in my mind, requirements in design are different. And so maybe the real requirements of what we want, we should tell the designer, and then they could build their design around it with the historical, whatever we wanted. But it seems to me that the requirements are the thing to build from. And if we don't do that, to me, requirements along with some sort of a budget, which we didn't do last time, then it seems like just to hire somebody first, it seems kind of backwards to me.
Yeah, that part of the statement of qualifications or request for qualifications that we do, we'll spell out in there that this is what we want from the finished product, and we'd be more than happy to put in there a dollar amount. This is what we expect it to be, or less.
Sure.
A lot of times that scares me. If you give them, say, 100,000, it's going to come in at 99.9. But if we know that we're getting good value out of it, then it's worth it.
But am I right, that the design of the facility versus you design it from the requirements?
Yeah, the design is going to be completely different.
Okay.
What we're asking for now is basically conceptual. They're going to draw the pretty pictures. It's more of what an architecture firm does. They show you basically what you tell them you want. That's what they're going to show you on the conceptual. And then we get feedback from that, and then we proceed to design, which is quite a bit more expensive and more extensive.
And there was a figure that SNH?
SH.
SNH, that they sort of inferred a figure maybe to rehab the old pool. And so could that be a requirement of whomever we hire now to mesh the two, or should they be separate?
I think it would be wise to use the information that SH Architecture came up with, because there's no point in recreating the wheel.
Thank you. That's good.
And we do have the next agenda item is specifically for determining whether the existing pool can be repaired or not. Following up on what's already been said, I do think we need to give them a budget cap. And I do understand what you're saying, that sometimes that gives them a target. But as I recall, there were 3 proposals put together by SH last time. If you want to go small, medium, large, however you want to refer to it. But as I recall, before other figures were added, their costs were, and again, I could be incorrect, but I believe it was 15 million, 21 million, and 27 million.
That sounds familiar.
Okay. I really feel that we need to give them a ballpark that's between 15 and 25. I realize that's a fairly large spread, but that's really where the other estimates were coming in before. And I realize that several things were added on to that later, but just giving them no idea of what we have available might be even more dangerous than setting limits on what's available.
Yep.
I would also like to see included in there consideration of the Murtha type pools, so that we get an idea of, okay, if we go with a concrete pool, it's going to be one cost. If we went with the Murtha pools, it would be a different cost. And so that we get an idea of a comparison between those two. I think the committee's indicated in the past that we like the idea of the Murtha pools. They have quite a bit of flexibility to them. Their longevity seems to be considerably longer than the concrete pools are. So I think that's something that also would be included in any RFP. We've also talked about the fact that the standard pools are 25 meters by 25 yards. So rather than them taking any time looking at, a 50-meter pool, we're looking for that standard pool. We've also talked about the secondary pool being a 4-lane pool. So I guess that would be 25 yards or 25 meters on
It would be yards.
yards.
I'm thinking we probably should it'd probably be more cost effective just to make one.
One.
With a sloping bottom.
Do you mean just one pool, or? Well, I'm sure that would be less expensive, but I think from other things that we've discussed in the past, there needs to be that 10-lane pool for the competitive swimmers, but also the 4-lane pool for water aerobics and the other.
Mom and babies and mom and tots and that type of thing.
Right. And that was a pool that it went from shallower to deeper, as I recall, also?
That one probably would be more uniform
Yes.
depth.
Okay.
So,
The warm-up pool is you'd have to have it about the same size to take people to be able to walk inside of it and not be drowning as they walk. So it would be a smaller level pool, and it would probably remain consistent over the thing, because you could have a number of classes in there at one time. So.
Okay. We had also talked about, or it has been discussed, the feasibility of incorporating the existing racquetball courts into whatever may be. The location of the pool obviously needs to be looked at, to be least disruptive to the park as possible. I believe under the previous design, the idea was that potentially the Girl Scout building, the multi-use building, and the tennis courts would all be taken out. I would prefer they look at, can we reposition the pool? We've eliminated the outdoor pool for now. Can we reposition that in such a way that those other facilities, existing facilities, will remain and may even be incorporated into the design as far as the multi-use building goes? I realize that the Girl Scout building is right between the existing pool and the multi-use building, but since the multi-use building is there and it provides space for meetings and things of that nature, is there some way to incorporate that into the design? The filtration system, I think, is also something that, you know, we should give them an idea of the type of filtration system that may be needed. And you know, Mr. Anderson may be able to speak to that much better than I can, but again, I think we need to give them an idea of what we're looking at as far as that goes.
I think we have the basics in the mechanical room of what we'd like to see, and this is based on standard practice with the city of Henderson and all the other sister cities. The location of the pool, if you take the south end of the pool where, and if you want to incorporate the racquetball courts, for example, you could probably put it right in between Bravo Field and the existing pool right now, incorporate that building into the design of it, and keep the racquetball courts. And then actually when you move over to the new pool, then you can demolish the existing pool where it's at and make that into a park. So it's the same basic concept, it's just using a different end of the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple other things that I know we've talked about in the past is we're going to want some seating available for the 10-lane pool. I think the number 250 people has been discussed for bleacher seating. A meeting room of some size. Mr. Hall, I don't know if you guys have had an opportunity to discuss what you think you might need for a multi-use room that would be available for meetings, training, that sort of thing, you know, whether it's 20 by 20, 30 by 30, you know, what size that you feel is necessary.
Yeah, we've been discussing that, and we haven't really put our finger on it, but we're really close to that.
Okay. So I guess we could just say some type of multi-purpose room.
Yes, sir. We could have classes in there. We could have activities, CPR classes, that type of thing. It'd be a multi-use room type of deal.
Okay. And then locker rooms. I know it's been discussed previously. There would be a women's and men's locker room, and then probably two.
Family.
Yeah, what they call family locker rooms.
I wrote down a list here of stuff that we probably would need. One large swimming pool, 10 lanes. One warm-up pool, 4 lanes. You have to make a choice whether we want to go with the natatorium or some sort of cover on the existing pool and the 4-lane warm-up pool. On the mechanical room, we'll need to be bigger because, again, if we go with a new pool concept, you're going to have 3 heaters and 3 filters, and it's going to increase the size of the mechanical room with the health department codes. Locker rooms, as you mentioned, 1 men's, women's, and a family locker room. Storage is very important at a swimming pool for chemicals and that type of thing. An office area where you greet the people coming in. It could be an office, and part of the requirements of the aquatics coordinator would be able to be overlooking the swimming pool and not be on the opposite side of the building, so they can keep track of safety and lifeguards in that. 1 meeting room we talked about, and then the restrooms if we want to have an outdoor restroom or whatever. But those are the basics of what the minimum I would think of what we would need if we build new.
And that's a fairly complete list. I do think that, we need to look at what the shell of this is going to be constructed out of. That was clearly the most expensive part of the project. So I think in all fairness, we still need to look at some type of bubble structure. I've seen a lot of new products or more recent products than the one we have that would certainly be an improvement. And, you never know if the brochure is telling you the truth, but they say that they have air handling systems that you don't get the problem with the chlorine smell that we currently have at the pool. So we'd have to look at something like that. I would also like to have them look at the possibility of at least significant portions of the roof being constructed out of solar panels. There's a potential there that we may be able to get our partners in the solar production interested in assisting with something like that. That also helps lower the cost of operating the pool as well, if we were to do something like that. That may also be extended out into shade areas that are not enclosed but provide some seating or something, that those panels could also be made available for that. Again, looking to try and reduce the cost of operation of the pool as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's my wish list. Ms. Carroll?
Would this, would the estimate or whatever they come up with, does that also include demolition?
That would include that. And I was going to mention, if we give them, I'd like to work backwards at a total dollar amount that we're willing to spend, back off the construction management, the contingency, the inflation, back off all that and get to the number. And that would be the number we'd present to them as, we want a $15 million pool and this is what we want. But yeah, it includes demolition, everything. Yep.
And I agree that the solar's a good thing. I don't know if you could incorporate solar with a bubble, but maybe you can. I don't know.
I like the idea that the mayor has thrown out of, you could make other shade structures near there and you could still wire it right to there and use the solar for those shade structures. It'd be hard to do on a bubble, but there might be technology out there that works.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things on the solar, we had solar back 25, 30 years ago, and we pumped chlorinated water up to the top of the racquetball courts. Well, the chlorine ate the copper piping, and within 5 years we had tremendous leaks up there, and we had to take it down. So it would have to be some sort of system where you have an internal heater coil of some sort in the that the water passes through to get the heat, as opposed to, you know, taking that water and kicking it up there, because that doesn't work.
Well, yeah, and I'm talking about PV panels, you know, for electricity.
Right.
Certainly
that would work
there's-
for, yeah.
Certainly there's an opportunity to look at what might be available. But yeah, there's no point in putting a system in that we know the water is probably going to heat up in a few years. And by that, what I was referring to with the PV panels is that those might actually form the structure itself. So you'd have some type of grid work with the panels serving as the roof covering, potentially side covering. You know, obviously you lose a lot of efficiency by putting them on the sides, but something of that nature. And again, if a bubble structure, you know, if that's all we can afford, yeah, I wouldn't expect there to be a lot of use for solar panels on something like that, but the outside shade structures might, again, provide at least some energy savings there. But what I was talking about is different concepts. Anything else, Mrs. Carroll?
So, I mean, could we have them look at a couple different things, like maybe the bubble situation and then maybe the enclosed with the like sliding garage door type things, have them work up two or three different scenarios? Okay.
Mr. Adams?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of backing on that. You know, I know the grander we make the scope of this, obviously that's where the more the cost goes up, and one of the big things we're trying to do is to stop that. However, you know, I think, you know, yeah, comparing having the bubble, what is that cost of getting the bubble versus, you know, the natatorium, so we can see, are we really saving that much? I mean, if we are, it is something we should consider. If we're not, comparative to everything else, then, you know, maybe we want to go with something a little bit more solid that we could use the solar panels, you know, so it kind of covers those costs in other ways. So I think comparisons with the bubble versus natatorium is really good. With having the one sloped pool versus the two for, you know, having the competitive and then the warm up or the class pool, I think that might be worth at least having them look into as to if
To
that,
see what's cheaper.
right, because you're not, if we're going to be having a competition there, I don't think we're going to be using the 4-lane pool for a class during that same time because of everybody that's going to be there. So if that is one way in which there's not, classes or there's not competitions going on, then they still have that one portion of the pool that is at that one level, and then it's sloped in, and then essentially they would just dive in. Essentially everybody dives in from one side of the pool, right? And that would be the thing, that you just don't have people diving in from the other side. Is that problematic for meets or competition swimming?
Well, probably the whole, anywhere there's competition, it'll have to be a minimum of a certain number of feet uniformly. It could be deeper, but it can't, I was just thinking if it would be cheaper to make one pool, you could still have 4 or 5 shallower lanes for classes and whatever, and then have the 8-lane competition pool. You would just have to, the water temperature would have to be a little warmer, which, whatever, because it would have to accommodate the classes and lessons and stuff as well as competition.
And when you have like a relay event where, say, somebody gets to one end and then the other side, is it problematic that essentially they would only be able to dive in on one deep end, or?
That's, we sometimes have events where you can dive in after a 25, but that's not real life. That's not USS, that's not high school. It's like a practice thing. That being said, every edge should be deep enough.
Okay, so we're
At least three of them.
okay.
Maybe not the far one. That could be.
I got you. All right.
As long as you're going this way, this one doesn't have to be.
And then I guess just in general, what was in the RFQ? I mean, is it just basically, hey, we're once again we're interested in a pool, come at us, or what kind of goes into that? What does that look like?
I didn't read them in detail. Roger, do you remember what we were asking for?
Well, basically, I think the more information you can give them up front, the better you're going to get the finished product. So if you start off with, just like you said, we want a pool and it needs to be this big and go for it, then you might not like what you see. But if you tell them and you provide them with a list of stuff, just like I read off, one large swimming pool, 25 meter by 25 yards, 10 lane, one warm-up pool, 4 lanes, X amount of depth, one natatorium if you want to do that, or a bubble, maybe get the process there and analyze both. The mechanical room, obviously, you're going to have there's 2 pools, but you'd probably want to kind of have it ready to go for 3, just in case come down the road you get a donation of a couple $1,000,000 and you want to put that outdoor pool in there. You might as well do it now and have it ready to go, just in case, or you're going to have to kick out a wall and put another heater in, and you know what I'm saying. And then the locker room storage, and try to be as specific as possible with square footage and whatever. And then I think you'll get a better product from the company, as opposed to just saying design us a swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think kind of to what the mayor was discussing was trying to incorporate as much of the surrounding area as we can, I think is obviously beneficial. I mean, it's, it not only saves that, but it's, it's greener, I guess, and we're not tearing something down just to build something back up. So anywhere that we are able to do that, I think is of benefit. And having them, I don't know if that's something they can do. Are they able to assess feasibility of incorporating those types of things and how much that would cost? I mean, is that something they can look at? Because I think that's a really good thing for us to look into, is that incorporating what we already have, so that we're trying to be as straightforward with what we want is a new pool that we can have some competition in, that also serves the community members that are looking for classes or other just recreation purposes. And we've got some better locker rooms for them, but that's kind of the heart of what we're getting at. But we would like to include some of these other amenities that we have had in them, and if there's any way to incorporate that into the design, it would be that would be the most beneficial for us.
Yeah, we can put options in there. We can be specific on the items that we know we want for sure, but then when it comes to the
Practical.
pool construction, we can say we want an estimate to include concrete and one to include a steel pool like Martha. And then same thing for the bubble versus an auditorium. We can put those options in there.
Okay, that's cool.
I guess one feature that I forgot to mention that we've talked about in the past is some type of splash pad or, children's play area. It might not be a pool, but some type of water feature for usually younger children. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be restricted to younger children, but something of that nature for kids that maybe haven't learned to swim yet, or maybe just, the parents would prefer that they not be in the pool at a particular time.
Just like everyone's saying, like to leave it to the architect with the running start. And for the pool, for example, I have a ton of comments for design, which will wait. But the pool, for example, is a basic architectural drawing. That's something I can do. And for the exterior of the building, maybe a couple options. If we put the pool by the racquetball court, or if we were put it the other side, I have an artist that works for me that can just do a tiny pencil sketch so we can kind of start going in the right direction. Like Mr. Racky said, historical planning, even a basic drawing of that would give them something to look at.
Oh, yeah.
Pool depths, heights, it can even go into as far as the tile choices, and that may refer back to Sarah and stuff like that, and the lanes. Anything that we can give them is going to save in the end, because they're not going to give us this packet and say, oh, we don't want those tile, or we don't, anything that we can kind of think of, deck, etc. And so on that, there is one person that, Mayor, you met with me, and he's a owner of Oasis Pools, and he's been doing commercial pools for a long time, and he's kind of like the whiz or the doctor of the filtration systems and everything like that. And that might be a good person to have come in as we get closer, or next month, or whatever, as a guest speaker, because he basically takes what they have designed and comes up with a realistic way to work it. And there's a million options on how to do it. And that could be something that is a very important part, if that's something we're interested in, having him come. He's got a ton of knowledge and kind of use what stuff we have for free, say, to get a better start. So I'll save the rest of them for the design part.
Okay.
I just didn't hear anything about the break room. Is there going to be a break room for the employees?
I don't think we specifically mentioned it, but I know we had talked about it before.
You need one.
And it may just be like an employee locker room that also incorporates, some place where they can come in and have their meal, or, microwave or refrigerator, something like that, but also an area where they can lock their gear up when they come into work.
Yeah, we currently have a lifeguard room that is overlooking the pool, so during the summer, through operation of the pool, they can see the kids as well as get out of the heat for 15, 30 minutes, and then transfer back into the workforce, so.
And if it's also possible, I don't want to say like, oh, we can just let them have their recreation room in the multi-purpose room, or where it doesn't matter where the workers go. I don't want to say that, but any chance, since we do have the multi-purpose building, and then if we would have a multi-purpose kind of room or classroom there, and then a break room, I know just putting up 4 walls and just expanding it a little bit extra doesn't cost that much more, but just trying to consider how can we best optimize our space, and how can we best optimize the use of our money so that we are giving a very a good break room, right? A good place for the employees to be able to have that space, but without trying to incorporate. And then we're going to have this little room, and then this room over here, and then this room, and then we have the multi-purpose room. I just want to be sure that we are being economic with everything that we're doing. I'm not opposed to having as much as we can, but those things do drive up costs, and we are trying to pinch pennies here, unfortunately. So I'll put that out there.
And I think Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in a lot of the pools in Vegas, at least the lifeguard room is glassed. It's kind of like what we have in the summer, but not in the winter. We can't do it. But they're looking right on deck, and that is a safer thing. And it's makes for ease of transition, and something like that would be good. And it's not a huge room, and they have a microwave and a fridge and stuff in there, but they have the view of the whole pool, so.
And I don't know how often it's done, or if it's done at all, where people reserve the pool for an event.
Yeah. They do.
But if something like that were to happen, I believe that the multi-use building is close enough, and that already has a kitchen in it, that they could do their out-of-water function there. Again, I get that it's not ideal, but...
We currently do that right now with our birthday parties. We rent out the multi-use building and the swimming pool for X amount of time in the pool, and then they go over and have lunch or whatever, the birthday party part at the multi-use building. That's pretty successful, so...
What kind of feedback have you gotten from people who've done that?
They love it. They're getting the best of both worlds, where you can have a party with a cake and decorate the multi-use building and have a swim party for a couple hours. And there's a fee for that, and we've combined the two fees in a birthday party package, basically.
Well, and again, I think as Mr. Adams said, that we probably don't have the money for the ideal situation, but we've got existing facilities there that, I get, you're going to have to walk a couple 100 feet probably, but, if that's the best we can do, then it's still something workable, and it sounds like it's been working, so. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Real?
I just would like to bring up the fact that we have a really nice splash pad down at Veterans Memorial Park, and I would question whether we need to duplicate that. I don't know how much that costs if you did something smaller, for the little kids at the pool site, but the one down at Veterans is very nice.
Yeah, I think from talking with Mr. Anderson that a feature like that really doesn't add much in the way of cost to the pool. And again, I'm not talking about something the size of the one at Veterans, but just some place where, parents can bring their very young children that maybe they don't want in the pool without them being right there, but someplace for those kids to be able to have a good time and still be very close to their parents. Any other questions or comments regarding, and I do think, as Mr. Anderson said, and I realize that, there's some slight appearance of a conflict, but I think Mr. Anderson is offering to bring someone in who has been in the pool building business for a couple of decades at least. Yeah. That's something I think we should consider too, is a pre-consultant or someone who's able to assemble our ideas a little better before going out to a full-blown design firm.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
One thing that he could be possibly a really help with is basically there's so many new features now in the mechanical rooms with the high rate sand filters and all the other high-tech stuff. It would be nice to maybe get a list from him of what he would recommend in the mechanical room. What is the standard practice nowadays that other cities are doing that you need by health department standards? I'm sure he's a CPO and that he's qualified and he probably works on a lot of the stuff, and he can tell us what are other cities using right now. And maybe we can have a list from that and use that list and give it to our consultants and say, this is the typical type of stuff that we'd like to see. And that would focus, the company on it. Just a thought.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I don't know if that's clear enough for you yet, Mr. Luttrell. Again, maybe that's something we should look at, is to see if Mr. Anderson might talk to his person and see if that person's willing to come to our next meeting, and if he's able to, based on what we've said today, come up with some ideas, that might be worthwhile for us.
I think it's a great idea.
To that, it might be something that if it's something you're willing to do on your own time and volition and everything like that, you're free to do the research and any work you want. And then, if you say, hey, I've got something here that I've been putting a lot of time into that I'd like to discuss with the board, maybe that's something that if with enough appropriate time and we can talk about it more when we talk about future agenda items, have it get put onto the agenda so we can look at it, discuss and say, hey, this is really great, or, oh, maybe this isn't quite, what we're thinking, but it at least allows us that opportunity for us to all get together and kind of to look at it, because it does get kind of hard. It's nice that we have a big board that we can discuss with, more than just one other member, but that way we can all, get our eyes on it, and, we don't, that's kind of, it would be obviously your responsibility to prepare something like that, but I think that's something we could consider.
Yes, I would like to do it, and I'll talk to Gilbert after this meeting, and he's been asking me when he can come in because he's interested in how these work.
Cool.
And that would be something that, and I've got a lot of questions in the design part where hopefully after that, we would have a basic layout of the pool and we can start working on that where next meeting or whatever, there's additions and extra lead choices and things like that where we can kind of start from there.
Anything else? Anyone else? All right, well, we'll nail that down when we get to our last agenda item then. Item number 3 for possible action, discussion and direction regarding retaining a consultant to provide their professional opinion on repairing the existing aquatic facility and associated cost estimate. I believe it was in our first meeting's packet. I had sent the summary that SH had done regarding potential repairs to the pool. That was more of just a narrative. So I believe that the need is there to say, to show the community, and we may learn something. We may realize that, well, hey, wait a minute, there are some other options. But I believe we need a more definitive review of the existing structure. I know there are several references in that SH summary or narrative where they say, if you do this, that's going to require something else to be done. And when you do that, it's going to require something else to be done. So that is described in that summary, but I just feel we need something more definitive. If we're looking at a multi-million-dollar project like this, there's certainly a lot of folks who have said to me, why don't we just fix the old one? What's wrong with the old one? Well, they haven't taken the tours of it as we have, but at least I'm not an engineer. I'm not able to look at something and say, this is the condition of the concrete or this is the condition of the pumps. So I think we need that, but again, we'll open it up for comment. Mr. Cohen, anything that you'd like to comment regarding potential repairs of the existing facility? Is the green light on?
Now it's on. Okay. Yes, I did do over a 2-hour tour, and there are some extensive repair work required. And like you're saying, once you start a repair, you find something else wrong. It's like repairing a car. At what point do you stop repairing it and get a new one?
And I think one of the basic things that is a problem is it's not deep enough. So yeah, I guess there are some ways that you can change the depth of a paint, but the fact is that the school district will not allow swim meets to be held or any type of swim meet to be held because the pool is too shallow.
Yeah, that's correct, and they're afraid that somebody would dive off a starting block and break a neck, and then we would be liable for that. So as soon as the new regs came out, and that was a number of years back, we canceled all the swim meets at the Boulder City pool.
Okay. And we're not talking about just the high school, right?
Oh, we're talking competitive USS meets as well. It's about about 2002, I feel like we had to stop having meets there.
Okay.
Well, it seems to me that there's enough things wrong with that pool that I wouldn't want to spend a whole lot of money. I mean, you mentioned that there's a verbal or a list, but maybe I don't know if it's got the money attached to it. But I kind of remember something like $12 million, and so I don't want to spend $30,000 to come up with the same thing.
I agree, but I do think that, that letter or narrative or whatever it is that you want to call it, it certainly had a lot of information in it, but it wasn't all that specific, and it was more optional, saying that, well, if you do this, then that. I think we need to know, well, what has to be done there. So I agree with you. I don't want to see a whole bunch of money spent just to get an answer that says, yeah, you're right, you need a new pool. But I do think that as far as the community is concerned, they need to understand what the condition is there and what the cost to try and repair it and bring it up to current standards might be. Member McNay?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with all the members here so far, and I'm not an engineer or anything either. And I know that we needed some kind of document, hopefully affordable, that's, describes how the repairs, what's needed, and to convince the people. I mean, there were editorials in the paper when the ballot was out there saying, you need to just repair it and all that kind of thing. So we need the data to say that, wow, well, look at this information about making this not realistic, maybe. So, but again, spending a lot of money on it is when you have other needs.
Well, I think Mr. Cohen put it right. I mean, all of us have had a car that at some point you say, I'm not putting another dime into this thing because it's just not worth it. So we need to find out if that indeed is where we're at.
I did go through it before the committee meeting started, not today, but in the beginning. There's not enough narrative and S&H to make that the cause without spending more money. I don't know. Is there?
I'm going to have to agree with the mayor that I think it would be beneficial to have someone go in there specifically to, that's what their contract is give us a dollar figure for what it's going to take to make that pool what we want it.
And that should include increasing the depth, because
If that's what we tell them to do.
Which
Yep.
then really changes not just fixing, but digging and everything else.
Yep.
Yeah. That would be priority number one, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
Ms. Carroll?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I hate, like you say, to spend money on it, but the public needs to know that we've looked at this option, we've weighed it, this is how much it is, and is this a viable option? I think it just makes us look more responsible or whatever.
Well, and as I say, we may be surprised, I would be surprised to be surprised, but
Me too.
it's possible. Mr. Adams?
In your professional opinion, do you think it is better to have the same firm that's doing the other one come in and do this because you can kind of package the deal together? Or do you think it's better to have a different set of eyes with kind of a different idea of what they are trying to accomplish, if you not accomplish, but with a different goal in mind, so that they're not saying, well, we're going to make this one look really good and make this one look like not a great idea. I mean, what do you think is, in your professional opinion, what do you think is the best approach?
There's pros and cons to both. Pro to them being the same firm is a lot of times it would be cheaper. Mm-hmm. But then also what you just mentioned is if they're hoping that maybe they'll get the final contract to do the design, they're going to make the new pool look a lot better than repairing the old pool. I don't think it would be that much more expensive if it would be two different consultants. And a lot of times these architecture firms, they don't have structural engineers on board, mechanical engineers. They would have to almost get a subcontract with somebody else to keep it as one firm. So I'd probably lean towards two separate companies.
I think that sounds good because I think the whole purpose of this board is to try and instill confidence in the process of getting there. Yeah. The transparency absolutely is important. So I think I would be leaning, especially if that you think that is a good way to go, I would certainly agree.
I would agree that a structural engineer would probably be able to tell us almost everything about the pool itself. I mean, this is something we break into pools every day, and when you start to get the pool cracking and rusted rebar, it's, I hate to use the term similar to cancer, but that's not the only piece of rebar that's broken. Yep. And so it travels, it starts popping, and you know, but just because it has rust on it doesn't mean it's bad. But after it's lost its structural integrity, you know, maybe somebody like that can, I don't know if you have to drill core samples or take a look in those troughs. That was one thing that on there, I know the pool's been leaking and there's been problems, but those troughs, the sidewalls are starting to bust out, and that means water's coming from the other side, and so everything in this path is just kind of washed out, the cement and the mix, and so it, you know, wouldn't want to be cheap and just get a structural engineer for that, but you know, that might be a way to be able to clarify and see if the pool's good or not.
Yeah, I'd definitely want a licensed structural engineer on whatever team we select. Mechanical engineer would be another plus.
Right. I think if you analyze the pool, you know, racquetball courts are okay right now, and they look pretty good. The roof, we had some damage on the roof, but that's been repaired. The mechanical room is a big rusty mess, and they would probably have to rip that completely out because the design, I mean, it's that bad. Our electricians are afraid to open up the box and see what's inside if they, you know, because it's really bad. The underneath the pool with the piping is another concern where we just, you remember I brought in the Thor's hammer, that big old pipe that was cracked. Well, that was 2 or 3 that broke by the diving pool in the last couple of years. So to be able to assess you know, what's going on underneath the pool is that's what scares me, and the mechanical room scares me big time. Other than that, the racquetball courts are fine. I mean, the interior part is fine. We have to, if we were going to do anything with that, we'd probably have to bring it up to code. But underneath the pool, the piping, and the mechanical room is, in my opinion, a pretty sad sight.
That reminded me of yet one more thing that we had discussed previously of potential requirements for a new pool would be a diving well, where you'd have diving boards in one area, and so the depth would probably need to be greater in that particular area.
Yeah, we have climbing walls right now in a 3-meter board, and normally if you start off
1 meter board, right?
1 meter, I'm sorry. The 3 we got rid of. But basically it starts off at a shallower depth and then goes down to the 14-foot depth for the diving board and the climbing walls on one section of the pool.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Cohen?
So, coming from, because I've asked people that live here, just talking in passing, what we need is a wish list of items that the community wants to see in a pool and what they would use for the pool. Basically, they're wishing that we put this in. Then we need a required list from the health department, what they require, and then what, as a community, what we would require in the pool so that we would have the meets here and bring more people to our community to spend more money in the businesses. And the third list would be the repair list of what the cost is. So when we have these 3 lists and people can see what the costs would be, then we could remove things that we don't need from the wish list, but let them also see that we did our due diligence and it's not cost effective, or it is cost effective to repair the existing pool or have a new one built. So that the community, I keep looking out here and there's not a lot of community people. I want them to be aware that we're doing everything we possibly could do to serve the community and provide what they want and need.
And that some of that work has been done previously under from the previous firm that was hired. There were 4, 5, 6 public meetings. Survey was done. So some of that is there, and I don't think that information really gets stale. I think it's, that was done over a period of many months, but yes, I agree. And I think, we can look back and bring that material forward for a lot of, what the community input had been previously. Any other questions about, this item in particular is on potentially hiring someone to evaluate the condition now and whether it is repairable or not. And I do want to make note on both of these that these items were heard by city council at their last meeting, and the direction there was, yes, to go ahead with this based on the recommendations of this committee. So I do want to make that note. Okay, any other discussions then regarding an evaluation of potential repairs? All right, we will move to item number 4 for possible action, discussion and direction regarding the design features of a new aquatic facility. I'll start this time with Mr. Anderson.
We've kind of broke into a few things with the depth of the pool. I did a lot of reading, and it's hard to, like, what regulations. There's so many different regulations, and then there's no regulations. It's like you can dive into a pool that's 4 feet deep if the coach is not concerned. And I guess one quick thought would be is if the pool had 6'7" on one side, 6'7" on the other, and it was shallower in the middle, I guess it would incorporate a bigger area for aerobics, for stuff like that. Because what it all boils down to is if we were going to build one pool versus 2 pools, making the one pool bigger, if we can do that, is going to be a substantial savings.
Exactly.
The guy's going to keep digging, they're going to keep doing the plumbing, and you're taking out 2 walls that wouldn't be in there. Mm-hmm. And so it would be, I'm not even concerned about the depth in the middle. If that was feasible and it was great for swimmers, then it would give more room for everyone else. If not, then there would be maybe an area on the side, like how it slopes up, and then there's an area on the side that's all 4 feet deep.
Yeah.
I think you could have. And then, is it, I guess we would prefer 10 lanes, because they're saying 8 lanes, 10 lanes, but you're the...
Well, 8 lanes is you need 8 lanes for competition. And those would all have to be pretty much, some could be deeper than others, but there would have to be a minimum depth there. It has to be, I think, 5.5 feet or something now. I don't know. It's...
I'd rather build it with a little deeper because
Exactly.
they keep on changing the rules,
I
and then
agree.
we build a pool and then we can't have swim meets. Because
Exactly.
They
Right.
just
So-
increase we need to find out what that maximum number is.
But there are pools like Heritage, it's one really long pool. There's competition lanes, and then it gets shallower, and they still can do warm up and warm down, and they can do aerobics, and they can do lessons in that other area. And it's just one pool. So if you had one pool, it would have to probably be a minimum of 12 lanes. 12 to 14 possibly, but you could do that as long as it was like, okay, and then you get deeper. Muni pool is like that also, and it works fine.
Okay, I guess for the main part, say 7 feet, just to, 6'7", whatever. If you made the whole main part
Right.
7 feet deep.
Yeah, at least the 8 lane part, yeah.
Yeah, and then it can come up, and then I guess for aerobics and stuff, you could have like a dead zone, another rope. And then if you wanted to have everybody swim, you could keep swimming. So just trying to give an idea of what it would boil down to, and that would be a huge savings. And if the expert swimmers on it, then that might be a good idea.
As long as you have the one side of the pool, which is the deep end of the pool, like it used to be, where you had a rope, and that's where your diving board is and your climbing walls.
Okay. And then it kind of does that. I guess the width of the deck. I've been trying to look around and see, trying to come up with a basic idea for this whole pool. I don't know, I couldn't even tell on the pictures, 10 to 12 feet, 10 to 15 feet, because I'm sure there's going to be the water trap on the side. That's a certain amount, and then you have to have breezeway to walk. And it kind of goes into the next one too, is like, okay, say it's 10 feet, on three sides, and then the one side would be where the bleachers would be. And just kind of shooting out there, I looked, I think it's like 14 and a half feet for 8 bleachers, so you can do the math. So maybe that side's 20 feet on that side, but realistically is 10 feet all the way around. Is that feasible? I mean, I don't even know how much room there is at the Boulder pool. I was even looking at those pictures.
Well, I can tell you it's not enough for a swim meet in there. It gets really, really crowded real fast. I would suggest you possibly contact, if you know anybody like in the city of Henderson or whatever, and you like a certain facility that is currently in operation, you might want to let us know. We can contact the aquatics coordinator and have them measure it out. And at least we have an idea of what, at least can see what you guys want.
I can get you in touch with Dave Lund at Muni Pool and see what theirs is. So.
And if you think that would work,
well,
and
we have
that
big
is
swim
and that
meets
is enough
there.
room,
Yeah.
then just have measured out and just give us the depth or the distance, and we can plug that into the equation.
Yeah, I can do Muni anyway.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah. That's kind of the next one on the list is what's the ideal pool that's around us, is to take some of their ideas. I mean, we'll see about their design.
And they have the bleachers that are metal that kind of fold up, but then they, you can extend them. They're not like concrete bleachers or anything. They're movable.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's kind of what I was looking up on that. And it goes into a lot of detail, and maybe this would go into the next meeting with Gilbert there too. It goes into the tile selection. They have certain tiles that are even glow in the dark that help, even when it's not dark outside, the banners on the top. And so there's a lot of little things like that I think that we can help out with to create this. Like I said, just to give them a head start. And one more question for now is if we were talking about saving the racquetball court, I mean, is the lobby and that other little room behind it, the office, is that in good shape, I guess?
Well, right now, I would say it's not in the best shape, but it is in good enough shape. I think it can be used. We're going to have a place where you check people in when they come in for racquetball. So you don't want it as a separate facility because that's another staffing requirement that you'd have to have. So you'd want to tie that into your aquatic facility, whatever you call it, and have a place where a person comes in. If they want to play racquetball, they go down a hallway to the racquetball courts. If they want to swim, they go into the locker rooms for swimming. So they're gonna have to tie all that in.
Yeah,
if you want to use the existing racquetball courts.
Okay. Yeah, because even if you blocked off that entrance and there was storage back there or room to check in or anything like that, design-wise, if the pool was on the other side by Bravo Field and the building stuck out a little bit up that street, it would give it a little bit more beef and look a little better, and usable storage. So.
I guess to that point about having like a staffed member there for the racquetball courts, is there the potential, since obviously we're not staffing the multi-purpose room, we essentially allow them a key so that they can operate the kitchen and all that sort of stuff. Is it potential that they could go into whatever the new lobby is of the pool, if it's not that same area, and essentially check in and say, this is the pass, you have to come in, we know who they are, just like we do with any other facility that isn't staffed? Is that a potential?
I think that's a problem safety-wise, because racquetball, you have people running around, you have injuries with legs and getting hit with balls, and I think you have to have a supervisor there just in case something happens. In the case of the multi-use building, they're having a birthday party, so there's really no inherent danger there. But when you're playing sports, a person could have a heart attack, and if you don't have a supervisor there, a person could die real quick. And so that's why in our gymnasiums we have supervisors. Anywhere where there's physical activity, we like to have a supervisor there to prevent any bad things from happening.
Okay. And then, as I'm not an engineer. I'm not familiar with what is standard now for new competitive pools. Is there a requirement on where the entrance has to be for the pool? So, does it have to be at the corner of a pool? Could you have it essentially anywhere?
I don't think that's a problem.
It's because I know I've seen a lot of competitive pools now, and the designs where it seems to be deeper on two ends, and then they kind of meet somewhere in the middle. Could we have where the main 4 lanes or the warm-ups are kind of in the center so that you were able to dive in both ways? Does that make any sense, or?
No, really.
Okay, that's perfect. then we don't even have to worry about it. So I guess when I think of aesthetics, when we're talking about design, to the comment about having, maybe potentially looking at our historic preservation committee for recommendations on aspects of the pool. When I, very first started, getting on here, I started looking at historic pools, because I was thinking, and there are a number of historic pools throughout the country. Most of them actually designed and built around the same time that Boulder City came to be in the 1930s, some of them 1920s, a little earlier. So, there is kind of that precedent. Now, obviously, we didn't have any of them here, but there is that precedent for that design, that Art Deco style and stuff like that, to potentially look at for here. Unfortunately, there does come a cost where the more focus we do on creating a very aesthetically pleasing, a very specific stylized design, those things you need, more people with that skill set, and they become more and more fewer as you start to look for very specific things, and that more specific skill set typically does bring the price up. So it certainly, I think, is something that we have to consider in ways. How much do we want something? Because we don't just want to throw something up with just, make it look like a storage unit and say, here's your new pool, and, be proud of that. But we also want to be sure that we are doing something that does fit within, what we're trying to do. So it's something that can be simple and elegant, but at the same time, without having to go too far and saying, we're going to get this beautiful, rendition of other historic potential things. So, but I do think having something that we can be proud in and something that goes with the design of Boulder City, I think is important. That we don't have, now we have not unfortunately, we have a great new school, but that design is not found anywhere else within the city. And then we could potentially have a new pool that then doesn't have a design that matches anywhere else because it's another new modern trend or idea. And then, we start to create this hodgepodge. And so I think at least consulting the preservation committee could be good. So we could have just some basic ideas of what we can look at to meet those designs.
Would this be the time to talk about like the overflow gutters and the tile on the inside of the pool? No, okay.
Right now we have a rim flow system, okay, and then there's a gutter system. Those are the only 2 types of systems. So
yeah, I like what we have,
right,
as opposed to Henderson's.
Right. The rim flow system right now, I don't know. I would have to do more research. Can we develop that into a high rate sand system?
Yeah.
Because we don't want an open pit, and that is, to get rid of that would be to save the mechanical room from going through the rust issues that we've had in the past, and we need a closed system, a high-rate sand closed system. And that could be something that we'd look into as part of the design.
Yeah, I just wondered if we could discuss that, you know, with the consumer, whatever, because I know how Whitney Ranch and Heritage, the way their gutters are, it's terrible. It's, if we could avoid that, it'd be great.
Yeah, it's hard on the knees when you're trying to climb out, right?
That, and also their tiles for backstroke starts are really bad. So, I mean, at some point we could.
Well, we can add it to a list. We should make a list and add that to the list, and that could be, you know, part of that list that this gentleman might be able to do.
And he'd probably be familiar with this concept. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I pretty much agree with what these two gentlemen said, and it's a narrow path. I mean, you want the outside the pool to look inviting and cool, but you don't want to spend a ton of money on that because we need to spend money on the inside, so we're just going to have to figure something out on that. Yes, it's.
I did have one more quick thing to add, is with regards to the having the open pit, and obviously in looking at that, it was a very short period in time in which that was even allowed. It was kind of like this new cutting edge technology for filtration system, and then they finally went, oh, actually this isn't good. So I think making sure that we're looking at, you know, tried and true things rather than saying we're going to get the newest, best, you know, cutting edge technology. You know, there's a reason they don't send the newest, best cutting edge technology into space. It's because they want to make sure it works. And so I think that's something we should really consider, is having tried and true methods and mechanics in there, so that we're not in the same boat where we are in 10 years and they say, ooh, we don't like that anymore. Next time you do this, you have to change it again. So
And part of that would be if we got a steel pool or a concrete,
Right.
so.
Well, I guess the hot stuff is the Defender equipment, but it's expensive as well. You know, just to add, hopefully add something to Ms. Carroll's comment about the tile and drain system. I did specifically ask that of the Murtha pool representative, and he said that they can design whatever type you like. They're not restricted to one particular type on those pools. So that is possible to have that built into that design. You know, I will certainly listen to doing a one pool thing, but I really do think, and maybe Member McNay may have something to add. Some complaints that I've heard is that people, seniors, children, are not able to use the pool at certain times of the day because of the lap swim that is going on there. So I think we need to take that into consideration. Certainly cost is our major consideration here, but I think the use of the pool also needs to be considered. When we talk about seating at the pool, you know, one of the main cost drivers is how much area you put under the span of the roof. And I've certainly seen facilities where the seating area, that roof area has been dropped down and is not part of the great span going over the pool. So, you know, whether that is worth looking into as far as bringing that cost down. And Mr. Hall, you'd mentioned that the deck area, you know, you get a meet going and there's people out there and a lot of things going on. If those bleachers are back 10, 15, 20 feet from the pool side in a different roof structure area, again, it may be saving some money by doing that and not having the span include all of that seating area.
And one of the things to consider too is that when you're looking at fold-up bleachers of some sort, don't make them steel, because steel will rust. They tell you it won't, it does. Make it, you know, spend a little bit more money and it'll last you a lifetime with aluminum or something like that, or another type of material. But the steel, they tell you it doesn't rust, but you know, 10 years down the road, you'll see it rusting. You know.
Yeah, good point. You know, design. Again, we've got constraints down there if we're looking to put it in a certain location, but I believe that a south-facing facility where there would be parking there on 6th Street, which is the street just immediately south of the park there. Potentially too, 6th Street is very wide at that point. Again, I don't know if it's necessary, but if there was a need for another 10 or 15 feet, we may have to narrow 6th Street to accommodate something like that. And it all gets back to, is it worth trying to save the existing racquetball courts so that you would have to put the pool structure there? You had mentioned that things need to be supervised. Well, I agree, but I don't know that, you can't see into racquetball courts unless you walk right up to the door. Is that correct? We don't have...
We have a total of 3 racquetball courts right now, and one that we've made into a weight room facility. So the 2 racquetball courts, 2 and 3, have big glass that you can see inside,
Okay.
and the 3rd one has a window that you can see inside as well. And so you can see if the lights are on, if there's a problem. If there's a problem and you normally don't play by yourself, you play with a partner of some sort, they can notify the person of an injury or whatever.
Right.
You can see that from the front desk in the lobby right now.
Yeah. And, there's all kinds of video out there on the market too, so that's something that may accommodate that concern, is to have the video being monitored from an office area. Okay. That's all I have.
I really don't have anything to add. I think they've come up with lots of good ideas, and 1 pool, 2 pool, it seems like we perhaps need the comparison in cost, and that's all I have.
I agree with everyone so far on the members. I guess one of the things that I worry about, because I have so many friends that do water exercise in the pool, and they all have joints that are replaced. And I worry about like ADA issues, accessibility to the pool. I mean, they struggle. I mean, we have put in new ladders recently to help people get in and out of the pool. And I know it was a nice thank you in the paper about a grandfather brings his disabled grandchild there, and they walk and they have to try and get her in and out. And have some electronic systems too, but I figure that should be somewhere in the designs to make sure that it's accessible and meets all the ADA requirements and all. And I really like, and Roger mentioned the windows that overlook, the pool from the staff point where they have their breaks when they, just as just a security thing. I mean, it can be a lot of people in the pool sometimes, and just 2 or 3 lifeguards, something could go wrong. And I think that if they could see out there when they're in there working and doing other things, and that they could look up and see something and maybe help assist. And then the other thing I keep thinking is that when we did all the focus groups with SH and all that, and the dream list, with all the people that they want, but can't we continue because of the cost issues? It said maybe the design should be enabled to be expanded to do the dream things that people want, that somehow it's designed so that it can grow and add some of the things that we can't afford right now. So I know nothing about design, but just some other things, and let's see if there's any. And I still think that the swim classes are just so fabulous here. The 26 years I've been here, I've not known of a child that drowned in this community. Everyone takes advantage of, infant classes, and the kids learn to be safe in water with the lake out there and the river out there. I believe that the swim classes have enabled us to keep our kids safe, because there's all the pools in neighborhoods and stuff too, but they know how to handle the water. They know how to survive. So I think we got to do whatever we can to make sure that we have the Red Cross requirement swim class needs that we have in the pool.
For sure.
Mr. Reel?
I think everybody's done a great job of bringing up all the things, and I recently was in the new Las Vegas Athletic Club that they just built off of the 515 across from Costco, and that's a private corporation that's building that, and I'm sure they want to cut costs wherever they can, but the new pool, they have 2 pools. One for the lap swimming and one for the exercise thing, so I'm sure that's that's to get people in there for the use of the pool, and I'm sure it would cost less if we did have 1 or 2 extra walls, but that's something that I would have to agree with things that have been said here, that we would need that.
Mr. Cohen?
I agree with everybody, and listening to Roger, it's like he took my notes and already discussed everything. So, no, I like the way we're headed right now.
Mr. Chairman, one of the last meetings you had, you requested a cost breakdown of what it cost us to put the air support structure, including the blower unit, and we were able to find that, and I'd like to pass that out at this time.
Thank you.
And this might have been a better question for earlier, but when we're talking about design, I mean, we have been talking about trying to keep the current pool open while we get this done, because, you know, we don't want to see the pool shut down for 2 years. That's something that we do think is
important. Very important.
Is important to this. So, you know, that does constrict our ability with, as far as design goes, but making sure that we have that capability within that space. And we probably are going to have to make some tough calls saying, is that playground going to have to go, and then do we have to put that somewhere else? And then do we have to get into the tennis courts or not, you know? So it's just things that we have to consider, so.
On the handout that Roger just handed out, if you notice that it's for design and construction, so I don't think it would be quite this much, but it was surprising when I saw this. But it's something when we hire a consultant, that will be one of the things that they analyze.
And I do think, I mean, even this is from 2011. You know, it's always great to get your email address out there in the ether so that everybody and their brother can send you emails. But I get emails from, I think, 3 different firms talking about different structures. And it's really not fair to call them bubbles anymore, because they, you know, they incorporate some framework into them with some fabric as well. So I think the bubble idea has come a long ways in the type of construction that's available. You may have fixed walls and fabric that, you know, helps seal the rest of the structure up. You know, it's not something that I'm necessarily advocating for, but we have to look at cost. And,
Definitely.
you know, again, I hate to sound like the old crank, but you know, the pool used to be open from May to September, and it was closed, and there was no bubble, and it just got covered up for the winter. I certainly don't want to see something like that. So all I'm suggesting is that we look at what options are out there. And I think since the bubble was put on, there have been significant advances in the type of construction that's available for something other than a very solid, rigid framework. But this is interesting. You know, even 10 years ago, stuff was expensive. So, okay. Any other questions or comments on design features? And again, I do think that, you know, if Mr. Anderson is able to work with the designer for his company, that will be very beneficial to start getting, you know, some real fleshed out designs to look at, start getting some ideas about size and layout. As Member McNay had said, certainly there's an opportunity to say, okay, please design this with these other features. We're not going to be able to afford them at this time, but we want to know how they could be incorporated into the plan, so that 5 years from now, if additional funds become available, those things might be affordable at that time, and not have to, well, okay, you got to rip the sidewall out of the whole structure. We want to try and avoid things like that if possible.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments then? All right, we'll move to item number 5 for possible action, discussion, and staff directive regarding timelines associated with the municipal pool. Again, just to start out discussion on this, it was voted on at the last council meeting that the ballot questions would be worded. I'm extremely hesitant about that because we're just sitting here now talking about basic designs and still don't have a budget, still don't have any of that. Certainly appreciate all the work that Mrs. Pelletier from the finance department did in putting together a scenario that would not involve a tax increase. I still think we need to deal with that top line of $30 million. If we can reduce that down into the $20 million, $25 million range, a lot of what, well, some of what she has in her proposal, like revenue bonds, can go away. We would not need to do something like that. I still think there are significant questions regarding what the word debt means here in Boulder City. The ballot question that was passed years ago restricting the ability of City Council to incur debt just says debt. It doesn't describe it. It just says you're not going to incur debt more than $1 million. So when we start talking about revenue bonds and things like that, I think that's going to be a real legal problem for being able to do that with what we have on the books right now as far as our laws go. So as far as timelines go, you know, Mrs. Pelletier did spell it out in her booklet that we all have a copy of, and she had made available at our last meeting. As far as the timelines for the ballot questions, the suggestion or comments that I made regarding the council's actions were, you know, we probably still have at least 2 months where the council could say, you know what, you know, we're not in a position to bring this to the ballot. And my concern about going to the ballot too early is that the answer comes back as no once again, and we're right back at square one. So I would much rather have a lot of information to go to the public and say, look, we've reworked this, we've remanaged it, we've got the finance department has come up with some solutions, but it all depends on that cost. And without knowing that cost, there's a whole bunch of open questions. But I won't say, well, I guess I will say, a non-member of this committee on the council decided to move that forward. So I guess at this point for this committee, we need to kind of look at what we have for timelines coming up. Within the packet, there's the requirement that the city council had put on when this committee was first created, that a report be issued or be received by council by the end of May. That would give us 2 months to come up with a report. So I guess my suggestion would be that at our next meeting, we have that agenda item. I mean, we've already discussed that this timeline issue will be a recurring agenda item. So for that, I believe that we need suggestions from all committee members as far as what that report should contain, what topics should be in that going to city council. And with, you know, if Mr. Anderson is able to get something from working with the company he's with, you know, perhaps we could get some idea of when we would have a sufficient list of what we're looking at of requirements to be able to go out to a design firm. Does that sound reasonable to you, Mr. Luttrell, as far as a timeline to get an RFP or an RFQ ready?
Yeah, it's not going to take long to get an RFQ ready. We can already start drafting it with what was recommended earlier, and then whatever Mr. Anderson's acquaintance brings forward, we can incorporate that or make any modifications. The RFQ really isn't that difficult. It shouldn't take very long.
Okay. Any other issues regarding timelines that other members of the committee would like to discuss?
I guess it will really kind of just depend on, what happens at the next council meeting as far as whether those questions actually do move forward or not. If the council decides that we do feel comfortable with it, I've talked to some people out and, let them know that, I thought it was good that we at least get the language so we can determine whether or not it's something we can even be confident in, so that we don't miss these deadlines too much. But, we don't want to, we kind of belly flopped on the last one. We don't want to do that again. We definitely want to, you don't stick landings and dives, but that is important that we do that. And so it's making sure that we just keep up on this time, because whether it's 6 months now or, from the going into November, or getting it into, I guess it's a little more than 6 months, or getting it down in June 2021, we just want to be sure we do it right. So the timeline is going to really depend on that, but I think we should try and move forward as though we are trying to get everything done in a timely manner, so that we're not once again up against that thing and saying, oh, we're not sure, maybe we can do it at the next election cycle, because it can be easy, because we can be afraid to take action because we're not certain of the outcome, but we never are going to be. So I think we should proceed with in full force, but knowing that it might not happen this go around, it might be a little bit later, but I think we need to make sure that way, if it does get pushed back, we're ready to go, and then we're absolutely ready by that next time. I think that's what's important.
And I think, if you look at page 15 of our packet, with the approximate timelines there's the April 14th date of City Council to appoint ballot question committees. I believe that council is going to have to make a decision prior to that. Once you get to that point, you're asking a lot of people to put forth a lot of effort, and granted that effort may be used later, but I don't believe you would be able to use the material that those committees would produce. You would have to do it all over again. So I think, as far as this committee is concerned, we probably need to make some type of recommendation to the City Council next month to say whether we believe it's in the interest of the community or not in the interest of the community to continue to move forward, because once we hit that April 14th date, that changes. The whole procedure changes at that point to start appointing ballot committees, which are committees of citizens who are going to write the pros and cons on the ballot questions. So I think that's a significant date that we need to have some recommendation available for City Council. So
We have really one meeting before then.
it would be the next meeting we would need to make that decision. Again, we don't have to make a recommendation, but that's kind of the purpose of this committee, is to do that.
I think we should. We might not, be happy with what we decide, or maybe we will be, but I think making a recommendation is what we are here to do.
Well, and sometimes a non-recommendation is the recommendation, to say, we simply don't believe there's sufficient information to move forward. Well, that's a recommendation. Okay. Any other questions or comments about timelines?
I have one. Is there sufficient time? Is there sufficient time between our meeting here and the city council meeting for them to incorporate our decision?
Well, James and I will make sure that we carry that forward to.
Okay, because I know there's a certain number
Yeah,
of days.
it is a very short time span, but again, that was another reason for Councilman Adams and I serving on this, is so that we'll be able to communicate that, even if we can't get everything in there. I'm sure that the agenda item is going to be worded in such a way that we can make known what the discussions of this committee have been.
I guess I want clarification. So we're talking about the ballot question lines that we talked about last time, the 3 ones that Diane put together, and that I was thinking, I thought we checked off on that 5-step plan anyway last time, but the city council didn't. Is that what you're saying, or?
Well, again, I think that what Diane has put together as far as how this goes through is not necessarily set in stone as to whether this occurs at the November 2020 election or if it goes to the June 2021 election.
And you think it may be too premature then? You don't have enough data?
Well, again, exactly
the
what...
funding, a 3-year road to funding success, that's a long way out.
Well, what she's talking about, though, is getting questions on the ballot
Right.
In such a way that some of this can start to move forward. The capital improvement fund expenditures, that was, I believe, $7 million of the project. So she has these different milestones set out, but a question is, when does that occur? Are things in motion now, or do we say we're not ready to go forward and we need to shoot for the June 2021 ballot rather than the November 2020? I know that Mrs. Pelletier's position is we should go ahead and get these ballot questions approved now in order to be able to do that for 3 years, or in 3 years is when they're talking about construction starting.
And some of this is for reserve funds, so it just starts building up the money that we may need. But I'm not a financier either, so, and then the Tract 350 proceeds, and
So
I just
Member
need to put it off if we can use the money.
Member McMahon, maybe this will help to kind of clarify a little bit or explain it. What council has approved was for the city attorney to move forward with 3 resolutions, which would include the recommendations from the financial plan. And this is going to be on the February 25th city council agenda, so next week. And they are the $7 million that she recommended for the capital improvement fund, the $1 million transfer from the capital improvement fund, and like you had mentioned a minute ago, the Tract 350 land sale. So right now that is moving forward, but as Mayor McManus said, that could change if at any point in time the council or this committee felt that it was moving too fast and in light of success or failure wanted to hold off another election. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what he was trying to convey. But right now, I would say it is proceeding to move forward based on council's recommendation from hearing the presentation from the ad hoc pool committee.
And I think if you look at milestone 5, that's ballot question of the June 2021 election to approve a 10-year bond. So with the way she has the finances laid out, construction could not start without approval at that June 2021 election. You wouldn't have enough money at that point unless that question succeeds. And actually, all 3 of these questions, if any of them fail, then the financing is not there. So if you don't get approval to remove or transfer money from the capital improvement fund, if you don't get money to redirect the proceeds of the Tract 350 land, and if you don't get approval for a 10-year bond issue, any one of those pieces, then the plan doesn't come together. Okay. Any other questions, comments, ideas on timelines? All right, then we will move to our last item, number 6 for possible action, discussion and staff directive regarding future agenda items. What we've already discussed is potentially Mr. Anderson being able to have some more concrete design ideas available. Potentially to have some recommendations. I don't know, Mr. Luttrell, will you be in position, or do we need to wait for what Mr. Anderson may have at the next meeting?
I'd like to see what Mr. Anderson has. We've got a pretty good list here, but I'm definitely not a pool designer, so if we got somebody that can help us, it'd be greatly appreciated.
And fortunately, they are.
Works great for me.
Okay.
And also, it would really help to get that list of the mechanical room stuff, so we can incorporate that in there.
Another issue was the discussion or initial formulation of a report to City Council. That's due by May 31st from the committee. So again, I believe that if each of us brings ideas forward of what we would like to see, then by the April meeting, we could finalize what we would like to see in that report.
Can you expound?
What is it that we believe City Council needs to be informed of about the process? So is it, is the recommendation, yes, we think going ahead with the ballot questions at this time is a good idea? Do we have any type of general idea of what this structure is going to look like? We've been talking about things like still locating it at Broadbent Park, trying not to disrupt or demolish the existing structures at Broadbent Park. I think it's things like that that would go into a report like that.
And we should each do our own.
Again, we're each going to be coming at this from a different direction, so,
Sure.
yeah.
And would that also include, we're going to fix it? Like, which we probably aren't, but would we say we've looked at the possibility of just fixing what we have and we either think we can or we can't? Would that be something that we would need by May?
I suppose, and again, Keegan, you mentioned whether it's best to have one firm or two separate firms. It's probably two separate firms because of the skills that are involved with that. So, I don't know, do you believe we could have an opinion by our April meeting?
I don't
Less
know.
or about 60 days? Yeah, that's cutting it short to do
Right,
the contracts and,
Yeah, if we were
That was
to
my
advertise
thought.
tomorrow and give them 2 weeks to submit something, 2 weeks would be short, but 2 weeks for them to submit, and then us a few days to review, and then contracts and approval, we're looking at a month and a half right there on a fast track
yeah, so
for
we're
them to even start work.
probably looking at something more like 120 days before.
Yeah.
Right, so that's something that probably would not be included in that, which I understand that, I'm just.
But again, I think that is something that can go into the report to City Council.
That we're looking at that.
We're looking at that, but it doesn't appear that the timeline's going to
Okay.
allow for that information to be available.
Okay.
Any other,
Yes.
okay?
This needs to be ready by May for the city council or sooner?
The end of May. So we would have a total of 3 meetings prior to the due date. Any other questions or comments then? Anything else that we would like to have on agenda? Not, we can dispense with this. Are there any other issues that we would like to see on the next agenda? Mr. Anderson?
We'll be able to take care of the pool area, start working on the mechanical. Is maybe we bring in the original footprint that the other architecture firm did and kind of go through like the storage room, kitchen, lifeguard, and try to give that one a better start too. So we have that to take with us.
Mr. Luttrell, do we have plans for Broadbent Park that would show, you know, how long the park is, how wide the park is, how far from the curb on 6th Street to the south fence of the current pool. Do we have anything that would show those measurements?
I don't know if we have it right now, but it wouldn't take much to get an aerial shot and then put dimensions on it.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, would that be helpful
Yeah.
then to?
That'd be very helpful.
So
And
do
if
we
I
want to
can-
do that and then also bring in the SH architecture, just start with the community preferred? We can lay them side by side, or I can even see if we can superimpose them, just for something to look at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Would be awesome.
okay.
And
So I-
then, would I be allowed to contact you directly, Mr. Luttrell? Yeah, of course. Okay.
Okay, so I guess the agenda item then would be dimensional drawings or something like that for Broadbent Park?
Yeah, we can just do a site layout, and then I'll see if we can overlay the SH architecture. If not, we can just do it side by side.
Okay. Okay, any other agenda items for next month?
I don't know if this is an agenda item, but if I get dimensions for the deck at certain pools, would I email that to Julie and she would tell y'all, or how do we do that?
If you can get it to her early enough, she could have it included in the packet.
That's what I was thinking. Just as more information to help you, you know, or your guy.
So probably something along those lines. I would forward that information specifically to Mr. Anderson for his information,
Good,
which would
okay.
probably then be included in his agenda item. I do have a question regarding that. For the overview of the park and how it lays out currently, do you want a separate agenda item for that, or do you just want Keegan to provide that information to Mr. Anderson, and Mr. Anderson would include that in his overall design of the?
You know, honestly, I think item number 4 on our current agenda, where it says for possible discussion, discussion and direction regarding the design features of a new aquatic facility, I believe that sufficiently meets the open meeting law of allowing us to discuss those types of items.
Including everything that would be coming from Mr. Anderson specifically, correct?
I think so.
Is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Yes, because, you know, they're all regarding design features of the facility, so that should be sufficient to inform the public of what we intend to talk about.
And I will double check on that, and I may break it down to have A being a verbal presentation from Mr. Anderson and Oasis Pools, da-da-da-da-da.
I think that would be fine.
Okay. Are we also, we're still doing timelines, we're still doing agenda items for the future meeting. Just for clarification, can staff move forward on the RFP process for the design, or for the consultant for repair?
Mr. Luttrell, do you believe you have sufficient information?
Just
Okay.
want to make sure.
Again, I think there was agreement on the committee that that was something that we need to have done.
Correct. I just wanted to make sure we were good to move forward with at least that particular RFP.
I believe we are. Okay. Any other issues then? And again, Mrs. Callaway, I believe you're right. You know, we need to keep the agenda items for what we have as 5 and 6 for this meeting regarding the timelines is number 5, and number 6 is the possible directive to staff regarding future agenda items.
Right.
Yeah.
4, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
it'll look very similar.
Yes,
next
I
month.
agree.
The new edition will be discussing the recommendations for the city council meeting for the May meeting.
Right.
Agenda's done.
Okay, well,
And just, does that include, just so we are with the open meeting law, we basically discussing, never mind, I've already answered my own question in my head, sorry.
see how easy it gets?
I had a big weekend.
The agenda wrote itself and all of that. All right. I guess then we are at our final public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak in public comment, and this may be on any issue. All right, seeing none, we will close the public comment period and the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Got this last? Okay, sweet. Thank you very much.
And so,
Now, when he showed up parking area,